If you live alone and you still do these four things, you're a good deal stronger than you think you are. And I'd guess nobody has ever told you so, because every one of them happens where there's nobody to see it. That's the whole point of the four. Number four is the one that surprises people, because it sounds like the smallest thing on the list, and it's the one that tells you the most. My name is Walter. I'm 82 years old, and I've lived alone in this house in Maine since I lost my wife Helen 7 years ago. Maybe you've been wondering lately how you're actually holding up. Not what you tell people, how you're actually doing. It's a hard thing to judge about yourself, and there's nobody in the house to ask. And so most people carry that question around for years without ever getting an answer to it. So here are the four. First one now, and stay with me to the fourth, because that's the one I'd most want you to hear. And it took me 3 years to work out what it meant. The first one, you still get up at the same time on a day when nothing requires it. That's it. That's the whole test, and I know how small it sounds. Here's what people who've never lived alone don't understand. When there's somebody else in the house, the day gets enforced without either of you knowing it's being enforced. She's up, so you're up. She's got a thing at 10, so the morning has a shape. The rhythm isn't yours. It's the arrangements, and it holds you whether you feel like being held or not. Take the other person away, and there is no enforcement of any kind. None. And I found that out on a particular morning in the second winter. I woke at 5:15 the way I've woken for 60 years, and it was February and it was black outside, and the house was cold because the fire had gone out. And I lay there, and it came to me quite clearly that nothing in the world would happen if I didn't get up. Nobody was expecting me. Nothing was going to spoil. The day contained no appointment, no obligation, no person who would notice. I could have stayed in that bed until noon, and the only creature on this earth who would have known was me. That's the moment I'd call the real beginning of living alone. Not the funeral. That morning. I got up. I'd like to tell you it was character. Mostly it was 60 years of habit doing the work, and I've been glad of that habit ever since. And I'd say the reason it matters isn't the hour. It's that a day you get up into has a beginning, and a day you drift into doesn't. There's no difference at all in the 24 hours themselves. But a man who rises at 5:15 has started something, and a man who surfaces at 9 because he finally had to has been started upon. And after enough weeks, the difference between those two men is not small. So if you get up at the same time on a day with nothing in it, you're doing something that requires no witness and produces no reward. And that's the first sign of a man who is holding. If you're walking this road alone, subscribe to this channel so you don't have to walk it alone. All right. Number two, the second one, you still finish what you start. Anybody can start a thing. Starting is easy, and it's easy for a particular reason. When you start something, you're still in the mood that made you want it. The wood's on the bench, and the idea is fresh, and it's Tuesday morning, and you can see the whole of it in your head. Finishing is a different business entirely. Finishing happens weeks later, when the interesting part is over, and what's left is the tedious end of the job. Sanding, the last coat, the hardware. And by then the mood is long gone, and the thing is 80% done, and 80% done is close enough to look like an accomplishment if you squint at it. And when you live alone, there is nobody to hand it to. That's the part that catches people, and it took me a while to name it. For 54 years, every single thing I made had a destination. Even when it wasn't for Helen, even when it was a cabinet for somebody's kitchen in Orono, she saw it. She came out to that shop and looked at it and said something about it, and I'd have told you at the time that I didn't need her to. I was wrong about that. That moment at the end of a piece, where somebody who knows you looks at the thing you made and says, well, that came out all right. That moment was doing an enormous amount of work in my life, and I never noticed it because it never once failed to arrive. Then it stopped arriving. I had a blanket chest on that bench when she got sick. Cherry, dovetailed, started in the spring of 2017. I'd been at it a couple of months when things went the way they went, and I walked out of that shop in September, and I did not go back to that chest for 2.5 years. It sat there under a sheet. I saw it every day. I went past it to get to other things. And in the third year, I took the sheet off and finished it. Took about 3 weeks. Nothing remarkable in the work. It was the boring end of the job, the fitting and the finishing, exactly the part that's hardest to make yourself do. And then it was done. And I stood in that shop with a finished blanket chest, and there was nobody to show it to. And I want to tell you honestly that it was one of the loneliest few minutes I have spent in 7 years. But here's the thing, and it's the whole reason it's number 2 on this list. I finished it anyway. Not for her, not to show anybody. Not because it was needed. I didn't need a blanket chest, and I still don't. It's upstairs at the end of the hall and it holds spare quilts. I finished it because it was started, and a started thing that stays unfinished sits in a house like a small permanent argument you're losing. Every time you walk past it, it says something about you, and it says the same thing every day, and after 2.5 years I'd heard it enough, and that turned out to be a bigger thing than a chest. Because a man who stops finishing things doesn't stop all at once. He gets to 80% and moves on, and there's a reason every time. And inside of 2 years, there are 6 unfinished things in his shop and none in his life either. And he has quietly become a man who no longer completes anything. I've seen it. It doesn't look like giving up. It looks like a busy shop. That's what makes it dangerous, incidentally. Unfinished work photographs well. A man with 6 things going has the appearance of a man fully occupied, and he'll tell you he's busy and he'll mean it. And none of it is coming to anything. Finished is the only word that counts. Everything else is a man moving material around. So if you still finish things, actual finish things, with the last coat on and the hardware fitted, that nobody asked for and nobody will admire, then something in you is still running properly, and I'd not underestimate it. Before the next one, tell me in the comments how long you've been on your own. Just the number of years, if that's all you want to put. And tell me the last thing you finished, whatever it was. I've a feeling that comment section is going to have some remarkable things in it, and there'll be somebody reading it tonight who needs to see that other people are still finishing things too. I read every single one, and I answer as many as these old hands allow. And if this is helping you, that thumbs up tells YouTube to show it to somebody else sitting alone tonight. Number 3, the third one, you still keep something alive that would die without you. This one I'd not have thought of at 70. I understand it now, and I think it's close to the center of the whole business of living alone. Here's the situation you're in, whether anybody said it to you or not. When you live alone, nothing in your house depends on you. That's the plain fact of it. The building doesn't need you. It would stand for years without a soul in it. The furniture doesn't need you. Your own body needs feeding, and that's about the extent of what's making demands in an empty house. And a man in that condition, with nothing depending on him, starts to drift. Not dramatically. He just stops being anchored to any particular hour of any particular day because nothing anywhere is waiting. So you have to put something in the house that would die. That's the plainest way I can put it, and I mean it fairly literally. Mine started with the feeder outside that kitchen window, which Helen kept filled for 24 years, and which I let go empty for 4 months without noticing. When I started filling it again, it was for my own sake. I liked watching the birds, and it got me through some hard mornings. But it turned into something else. And the something else is what I'm talking about. Because by the second winter, those birds were relying on that feeder. In January, in this part of the country, a feeder that stops getting filled is a genuine problem for the things that have come to depend on it. So now it isn't a pleasure. It's an obligation. There is a small population of chickadees and nuthatches out that window whose winter is measurably worse if Walter Brennan doesn't get out of his chair. And that is a real thing that is really true. And on some February mornings, it has been the thing that got me up. The larger one is the lupines. Helen planted that bed along the south side in about 1988, and she worked it every year for 30 years. Lupines are not difficult, but they're not nothing either. The bed wants thinning, and there's a certain amount of deadheading if you want them thick the following June. And if you leave them entirely alone for a few years, you get a thin, sad, half-gone version of what was there. Third summer after she died, I nearly let them go. I want to be honest about that. I'd been out there once in a half-hearted way, and I stood looking at that bed in August, and thought quite seriously about letting it revert. It would have been easier. And I told myself something at the time that sounded reasonable, which was that they were hers and it wasn't the same anymore. What stopped me was working out that this was backward. They weren't hers. They'd been hers when she was alive to tend them, and now they were a living thing on my property that would die without me, and that made them mine. And the question wasn't whether it was the same. The question was whether I was going to be a man who lets a thing die because tending it makes him sad. I worked that bed properly that autumn, thinned it, fed it, took out the couch grass that had got in along the back. In the following June, they came up the way they used to, thick and that particular blue that I've never seen anywhere else, and the whole south side of this house looking like 1994. Now, I want to be careful here, because I'm going to say something that sounds like it's about flowers and isn't. It is not about the lupines. It's about the fact that at 7 o'clock on a June morning, I go out and look at that bed, and it is doing well because of something I did in October. And that transaction, the thing that is alive because you attended to it, is one of the few available proofs that your existence is producing effects in the world. An old man alone in a house does not get many of those. The work is done, the children are raised, and most days nothing you do makes any measurable difference to anything. That's a strange thing to arrive at after 45 years of a trade where the difference you made was visible from the road. 60-odd houses in this county, and every one of them still standing. And now I can go a whole Tuesday without producing one effect on anything. Except the bed. Except the feeder. Except whatever your version of it is. So keep something alive. A garden, a bed, a feeder, a dog if you're up to a dog and honest about the years. Something that would be worse off if you stopped. And I'd say, make it something that will genuinely suffer, not something ornamental you could quietly abandon. The whole value is in the fact that it can't be dropped without consequence. Now there's a second half to this that took me longer and that I think is the better half. Once you've got one thing depending on you, you find you're more inclined to take on the next one. I don't fully understand why. But a man who is already keeping something alive is a man who says yes when somebody asks him for a thing, and a man who is keeping nothing alive says no. And I've been both of those men inside the same decade. Here's what it looks like in practice. There's a young family down this road called the Sullivans, and about 4 years ago, the husband asked me to look at a porch that was going, and I said yes, and we rebuilt it over a couple of weekends, and their baby slept in a cradle I made out of butternut. I would not have said yes in the second year. I know that with complete certainty, because in the second year I was saying no to everything, and the reasons were all good ones. What had changed by the fourth year was not my back, and it was not my calendar. It was that I had got back in the habit of being depended on, in a small way, by a feeder and a flower bed. And that habit made me available for the larger version when it turned up. That's the thing I'd most want somebody to take from number 3. It isn't really about the garden. It's that being depended on is a muscle, and it goes if you don't use it. And a man who hasn't been needed by anything for 2 years will genuinely find himself unable to say yes when a neighbor finally asks. Start small enough that it can't fail. A feeder is enough. 6 tomato plants is enough. Something that requires you at a fixed hour and would be worse off if you didn't come. And then when somebody asks you for something bigger, you'll find you've still got it in you, which is the actual point of the exercise. There's a thing I notice out at that bed in June that I'll mention and then leave alone. I don't think about Helen much while I'm working it. That surprised me. You'd expect a man weeding his dead wife's flower bed to be in some sort of state about it, and mostly I'm thinking about couch grass. But when they're up, the second week of June, thick, that blue, I go out with the coffee and stand there. And she's entirely present for about a minute and a half. Not sadly, just there, the way she is when something goes right. And I've come to think that's what tending a living thing actually gives you that a photograph doesn't. A photograph shows you a person who is gone, a flower bed she planted that you kept alive, that came up this year because of what you did in October. That's her and you doing something together, 36 years apart, and it happens every single June, and it will go on happening as long as I can work that bed. That's not sentiment, or it is, and I've stopped minding. The point stands either way. Something depending on you is worth having, and if it happens to be something she started, you get the second thing as well. We're coming up on number 4 now, the one that surprises people. The fourth one, you still go up to bed. I told you it would sound small. Here's what I mean, and I guess a fair number of you already know exactly what I mean and have never heard anybody say it out loud. When you live alone, there is nothing at all requiring you to go to bed. There's no one saying it's late. There's no one already up there. There is a chair and a fire and the television if you have one and a set of stairs, and absolutely nobody who will remark on it if you simply do not climb them. So you don't. Not as a decision. You sit and the fire goes down, and at some point you're not really awake and not really asleep. And eventually you surface at 2 or 3 in the morning cold and stiff and disoriented in a dark room, and then you go up anyway, in the worst possible condition, at the worst possible hour. I did that for most of a year. I want to be exact about the arithmetic of it, because when I finally worked it out, I felt like a fool. I was doing the hard thing twice. The thing I was avoiding was going up to that bedroom, and the reason was that Helen died in that room, and the bed had held 2 people for 46 years and now held 1. Falling asleep in the chair felt like a way of not doing that. It wasn't. I still went up. Every single night, I still ended up in that room and in that bed. I just did it at 3 in the morning instead of 9 at night. Cold, half asleep, with my back seized up, in the dark, at the worst hour of the 24. The avoidance bought me nothing. It didn't remove one instance of the thing I was avoiding. It just moved every one of them to the version that costs the most. That's what avoidance generally does, in my experience, and I'd been at it a year before I saw it. And I'd add that the chair was costing me in other ways I wasn't counting either. A man who sleeps 4 hours in a chair and 3 in a bed does not sleep well, and a man who does not sleep well is worse at everything the following day. Worse in the shop, shorter on the telephone with his son, less able to face the things that were already hard. So the avoidance wasn't just moving the difficulty to 3 in the morning, it was taxing the whole of the next day as well, and I'd been paying that tax for a year and telling myself it was just how things were now. I'd say to anybody in that pattern, it isn't how things are now. It's a habit with a start date, and it can be stopped, and it took me about a fortnight of doing it badly before it took. Now what changed it? And this is where I'd say the fourth one stops being about sleep at all. Now what changed it? And this is where I'd say the fourth one stops being about sleep at all. It changed when I started treating the going up as a thing I do rather than a thing that happens to me when I run out of chair. I built a walk. That's the only word I've got for it. At about 9 o'clock, I get up out of that chair on purpose. I wash whatever's in the sink. I write one thing down on a yellow pad in the kitchen drawer. One good thing the day had in it, which takes about a minute and which I've been doing for 4 years now. I bank the fire, which is a proper job if you want coals in the morning. Then I go through the house, back door, front door, lamp in the living room. Look in at the room that was Susan's and the room that was David's. And then I go into that bedroom and turn on the lamp on my side and I say goodnight to her. Out loud, most nights. And I get into that bed. On purpose. At 9 or half past, as a man who has decided to go to bed, the difference between those 2 ways of arriving in the same room is not small. One of them is a man being defeated by an evening. The other is a man ending a day. Same room, same bed, same missing person. Entirely different act. So that's the fourth one, and here's why I said it tells you the most. Because every other item on this list has some other explanation available. You might get up at 5 because your bladder does it for you. You might finish a chest because somebody's paying you. You might keep a garden because you like gardens. Nobody goes up to bed at a decent hour, alone, in an empty house for any reason except that they have decided their own evening is going to end properly. There is no external reason for it whatsoever, which is why it's the truest one on the list. And I'd say this to anybody currently falling asleep in a chair, and I'd guess there are a great many of you, and it's the most common thing in the world among people in our situation, and there's no shame in it whatsoever. You are not avoiding that room. You're just going into it in the worst possible shape at the worst possible hour. That's the entire transaction. Once I saw it that way, I could not go on doing it. Now, I want to give you the practical part, because I've told you what I do and I've not told you how it started, and the how is the useful bit. It did not start with willpower. I tried willpower. Willpower at 9 o'clock in the evening in a quiet house is worth very little, because the chair is warm and the fire is going and there is nothing at all forcing the issue. What worked was a sequence. That's the whole of it. I gave the going up a set of steps that come before it, and after a few weeks the steps carry you and you don't have to decide anything. Dishes, yellow pad, bank the fire, doors, lamps, up. 6 things in that order every night, and by the time I've done the first 3, I'm already standing and moving, and the decision has been made without ever being made. That's the trick, and it's the same trick as the shop at 9 in the morning. You do not want a nightly negotiation with yourself about anything, because you will lose about a third of them, and the third you lose will be the February ones. And the sequence does one more thing that I didn't design and only noticed later. It puts a boundary on the day. In a house with 2 people, the day ends by itself. Somebody says it's late, somebody goes up, and you follow in 20 minutes. There is a natural closing to the evening that is produced entirely by the other person existing. Alone, the day has no end. It just gets darker and thins out, and eventually you're unconscious in a chair. Which means you never actually finish a day, you run out of one. And a man who has not finished a day in 18 months has, in some way I can't quite put properly, not really been living in days at all. Just in one long, continuous stretch of time with sleep in it at irregular intervals. The sequence gave me back the day as a unit. Beginning at 5:15, end at 9. Something in between that I write one line about on the pad before I bank the fire. That's the thing I'd most want anybody to take from number 4. It sounds like advice about sleep. It's actually about whether your life still comes in days. And there's one more piece of it that I've only understood in the last couple of years, and it's the reason I say goodnight to her out loud. The going up used to be the worst part of the day. Now it's one of the better ones. And the thing that turned it was not time passing. It was that I stopped arriving in that room as a man who had run out of options and started arriving as a man who had come up on purpose to end his day. You'd think the room would feel the same either way. It doesn't. Not remotely. When I was landing in there at 3 in the morning, exhausted, having lost the evening, that room was the place where the thing happened. It was October. Every time. When I come up at 9, having washed the dishes and written a line about a good thing that happened and banked a fire I built, that room is where I sleep, in a house I put up in 1971, in a bed I shared with my wife for 46 years and now don't. Same facts, same October, entirely different room, because I'm arriving in it as a different man. That's the thing about the 4th one. It looks like it's about a set of stairs. What it's actually about is whether you're still doing your own life or whether your life is happening to you, and the stairs are just where that question shows up most clearly. Now, I'd not want anybody hearing this as though there's a right hour and I've got it and they haven't. 9 o'clock is mine because I'm up at 5:15 and always have been. Somebody else's is 11, and that's entirely their business. And there are nights I don't manage it. There was one about 3 weeks ago where I was in that chair until midnight for no particular reason, and I knew perfectly well what I was doing and did it anyway. One night is nothing. 40 nights is a pattern. The thing to watch isn't whether you got up out of the chair last night. It's whether you can remember the last time you did. That's the honest form of every test on this list, come to that. None of them are about last night. A man can do all 4 on a Tuesday and be in real trouble. It's the shape over a season that tells you anything, And the only person in a position to see the season is you, which is precisely why nobody ever gets told. Now, the honest part, and then I'll say the last thing. Doing all four of these does not mean you're all right. I want to be plain about that because I've just spent the better part of an hour telling you that these four things are evidence of strength, and I don't want anybody to hear that you can score 4 out of 4 and therefore everything is fine. They're not the same thing. Strength is about whether you're holding. Being all right is something else, and a man can be holding perfectly well and still be lonely enough that it's a weight on him every day. I did all four of these in the third year, more or less, and the third year was the worst year I've had. I got up, I finished things, I filled the feeder, I went up to bed at a decent hour, and I was in serious trouble quietly for about 12 months, and nobody knew, including me. So if you're doing all four and you still feel wrong, that's not a contradiction, and you're not failing. It means the structure is holding and something else needs attention, which is a much better position than the reverse. I'd put it like this because it's how I finally understood my own third year. The four things are the frame of a house, and a frame that's true and square and standing is a genuine achievement. It's most of the work. And a house with a bad frame cannot be saved by anything you put in it afterward. But nobody has ever lived in a frame. The frame is what makes the rest possible. It is not the rest. And a man who has got his frame up and thinks the job is done will sit inside it for years wondering why it doesn't feel like a house. I sat in mine for the better part of a year. What went in afterward was people, and I've talked about that at length elsewhere, and I won't do it all again tonight. But that's the order of it. Frame first, because nothing stands without it, and then the rest deliberately on purpose, because it will not arrive by itself. And I want to say one more thing about the strength these four measure, because I think it's badly misunderstood by nearly everybody, including me until fairly recently. The strength is not that you don't mind. That's what people assume when they see an old man managing on his own. They think he's built differently. They think the quiet doesn't get at him the way it would get at them. That he's the sort who was always self-contained, that some men simply take to it. I'd like to correct that on behalf of every man in this situation. I mind. I mind every day of my life. I minded this morning at that kitchen table, watching it come light on the cedars, with nobody in the chair across from me for the 2,500 and some odd morning in a row. The strength isn't in not minding. The strength is entirely in doing the thing while minding. Getting up while you mind. Finishing the chest while you mind. Going out to the feeder in 10 below while you mind. Climbing those stairs at 9 o'clock while you mind. Anybody can do a thing they feel like doing. There's no strength involved in that at all, and I'd not have made a list about it. What's on this list is four things that are done in spite of the feeling, by men and women with nobody watching, in houses where the feeling is the loudest thing in the room. That's the whole of it. That's what I've been trying to say for the last 3/4 of an hour. And there's a version of this I'd say to the people who'll be doing it after us, because I know some younger ones find these talks. Do not tell an old person who lives alone that they're amazing. I know it's kindly meant, and I've had it said to me, and I've said thank you. But it lands wrong, and here's why. Amazing suggests something exceptional, which suggests it isn't available to you, which is the opposite of what's true. There's nothing exceptional in this house. There's a man who gets up because he always has, finishes things because unfinished things bother him, fills a feeder because something's out there waiting, and goes up his own stairs at a reasonable hour because he worked out that the alternative was worse. Every one of those is available to anybody. That's the point of having made a list of them. If you want to say something to an old person living alone, don't say amazing. Ask them what they finished lately. You'll get a considerably better conversation, and they'll be glad you asked. And it may be the only time this month that anybody registers a single thing they've done. And if what you're carrying is heavier than that, if it isn't lifting at all and hasn't for a long stretch, or it's getting darker rather than changing shape, then that's beyond what a carpenter has any business advising anybody about. And I'd want you talking to somebody trained. There's no more shame in it than in ringing a plumber, which I did for 40 years before I learned to do it myself. And there's a second thing I want to say, and it may be the more important one. These four are all things you do alone. That's what makes them a good test of your own strength. It also makes them a poor test of your life, because a man can do all four of these every day and still be almost entirely isolated. I've known one. His name was Frank, and he lost his wife 4 years before I lost Helen. And I have thought a good deal since about what his days must have looked like at the end. And I'd bet a fair amount that he was getting up on time and going to bed properly right through it. None of the four require another human being. That's the whole reason they measure strength so well. It's also exactly why you can't stop there. So if you're doing all four, good, and I mean that, and you should take it seriously as evidence about yourself. Now go and do the fifth thing, which is on the other side of this list, and which I can't put on it, because it isn't about strength at all. Ring somebody. Have somebody in. Say yes to a thing you'd rather decline. The four are how you hold. People are what you hold for. And I'd say the reason I've been careful about that all evening is that this particular list is very easy to misuse, and I'd rather say so than have it happen. A man who's proud of doing all four can quite easily turn it into an argument for needing nobody. I've watched that happen, and it wears the face of self-respect. He gets up, he finishes things, he keeps the place going, he goes up at a decent hour, and he uses all of it as evidence that he's managing perfectly well, thank you, and doesn't require anybody's company or anybody's concern. He is managing. That's what makes it so persuasive. Every bit of the evidence is real. He's also on his own in a way that will not be survivable eventually, and he'll be the last to know, because the four things go on working long after the rest of it is gone. That was Frank, as far as I can make out. Not a man who fell apart, a man who held beautifully and had nothing to hold for, and the holding kept the outside looking fine right up until the end. So take the score seriously as a measure of your own strength. Do not take it as a report on your life. Those are different documents entirely, and only one of them can be filled in on your own. And the last thing, which I'd say to whoever needed this tonight, nobody is coming to tell you that you're doing well. That's the plain condition of living alone, and I think it's the hardest part of it that nobody names. For most of your life, there was somebody who saw what you did and registered it. A wife, a foreman, a crew, children who noticed whether their father showed up. Every one of those is a person keeping some kind of account of you. That stops, and it doesn't get replaced. So there is a man out there tonight who got up at 5 in a cold house with nothing requiring it, who finished a job nobody asked for, who went out in the weather to fill something because a small living thing was depending on him, and who will get up out of his chair at 9 and go up those stairs the proper way. And not one person will ever know he did any of it. I'd like that man to know that it counts. I can't see him, and I'll never meet him, and I don't know his name. But I know what those four things cost, because I do them in an empty house myself, and I know that they're done entirely on the man's own account, with nothing coming back. That's not nothing. That's most of what strength actually is at our age in a quiet house in February. And if that man is you, I'd like you to sit with it for a minute before you get up out of the chair tonight. Not to feel good about yourself particularly, just to register it once, so that it's been registered by somebody. It has now. That's the only thing I can do from here, and it's the reason I made this one. So that's the four. You still get up at the same time on a day with nothing in it. You still finish what you start. You still keep something alive that would die without you, and you still go up to bed on purpose. If you've got all four, take it seriously. Nobody else is going to tell you. Now, if what you're carrying tonight is heavier than the four, if you're doing all of it and it still isn't holding, then the thing that's missing is almost certainly on the other side of that list. And I made another talk about exactly that. About the 5 people I speak to every week, why it's 5 and not 15, and the 5 completely different jobs they do that I never knew somebody was doing until she was gone, and all five stopped at once. That's the companion to tonight. This one is about how you hold. That one is about what you hold for. It's right there on the screen. Go on over whenever you're ready. The fire's still going here and the kettle's still warm. I'll see you there.